Welcome to another BAR walkthrough video from SuperfastCPA. I'm Logan, and in today's video, we're going to be going over BAR Area 3. This is Section A7. This is a remembering and understanding topic. Recall the objectives and components of budgetary comparison reporting in the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report for state and local governments. And we're going to be doing that the SuperfastCPA way, which is diving straight into the questions to learn the material. Now, if you don't know much about our strategies, make sure you go to SuperfastCPA.com and sign up for our free 1-hour webinar training. In that 1 hour, we will teach you the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam so you don't waste months or even years of your time failing exams. And then after you watch that, you're going to want to learn more, so make sure you also check out becoming a SuperfastCPA Pro member. Pro members get access to a lot of great benefits, including the Pro course, where Nate explains in depth how to pass the CPA exam. It's kind of like a much more in-depth version of the 1-hour webinar. And also, SuperfastCPA Pro members get access to the member versions of these YouTube videos. Now, just to be honest, for the past couple videos and for this video as well, the member version is also only 5 questions as well as the YouTube version. But normally, the member versions are 10 questions and the YouTube versions are 5 questions, so members get a little bit of extra help and a little bit of understanding. But to be honest, with these past few videos, the sections have been things that I have wanted to cover, but they really just aren't that deep or they don't require that much information. So I felt like 5 questions was plenty for YouTube and for members. But again, if you like these videos, know that if you become a SuperfastCPA Pro member, you'll get access to the full versions for the videos that have full versions, which is most of them. So with that, let's dive straight into the questions. Okay, here we are at question 1. Which governmental funds are required to present a budgetary comparison schedule in the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or the ACFR? Is it just the general fund? Is it the general fund and all proprietary funds? Is it the general fund and major special revenue funds that have a legally adopted annual budget? Or is it all governmental and proprietary funds with any type of budget? So if you have any idea how this works, that's great. But if you don't know what the budgetary comparison schedule is or what, when it's required, that's okay. We are using these questions to learn those basics. So let's go ahead and go to the explanation together. All right, here we are at the answer. C, the general fund and special revenues fund that have a legally adopted annual budget, or again, that's the major special revenues fund. Looks like I accidentally had a typo there, but it's major special revenue funds. So pay attention to that. State and local governments must provide budgetary comparison to demonstrate accountability by showing how actual revenues and expenditures compared with the legally adopted budget. GASB requires this schedule for the general fund always, so they always require the general fund to have a budgetary comparison report. And they also require it for major special revenue funds that have a legally adopted annual budget. And that's the key wording there. It's not for all special revenue funds, it's for major special revenue funds that specifically have an adopted annual budget. Other funds, such as proprietary funds, fiduciary funds, or capital projects funds, are not required to present a budgetary comparison, though governments may choose to do so as additional information. So they can potentially do it, but they don't have to, but they do have to do it for the general fund always and for any major special revenue fund that does have a budget. So we learned kind of some of the basics there of when the budgetary comparison schedule is required to be presented. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 2. How must a government present its budgetary comparison schedule in the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report? So we know when it's necessary, but how do they present it? Is it presented only on GAAP basis, regardless of the budget basis actually used? Is it B, where it must be presented on the same budgetary basis used to prepare the budget with a reconciliation to GAAP if the basis differ? Is it C, it must be presented on a cash basis since that is the most common form of governmental budgeting? Or is it D, it may be presented on any basis with no reconciliation required? So again, what is required for when they actually have the schedule? So we learned when it's required, which funds have to have it. But now what is required to be presented? On what basis is it supposed to be presented? If you have an idea, great. If not, let's go ahead and take a look at the explanation together. All right, here we are at the answer. B, it must be presented on the same budgetary basis used to prepare the budget with a reconciliation to GAAP if the bases differ. So let's look through this. Budgetary comparison reporting must reflect the budgetary basis of accounting actually used by the government. So if they used cash, it has to show that. If they used modified accrual, it has to show that. Or if it shows some kind of hybrid, again, it has to show that. This ensures the schedule aligns with how the budget was legally adopted and controlled. However, if that basis of accounting differs from GAAP, the government is required to include a reconciliation, either on the face of the schedule or in the notes, to show how the budgetary amounts relate to GAAP financial reporting. This allows users to see both compliance with the budget and comparability with GAAP financial statements. So they are going to present this on whatever budgetary basis the government has. They don't have to report it on cash or on modified accrual, but then they do have to have a reconciliation for that budgetary comparison to reconcile it to GAAP. So those are some of the requirements as far as the basis for budgetary comparison scheduling. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 3. Which of the following best describes the minimum requirements for a budgetary comparison schedule in a government's annual comprehensive financial report? Let's go through this. Option A, the original budget, the final budget, the actual amounts and variance columns, meaning the original to the final and the final to the actual, presented on the budgetary basis of accounting with a reconciliation to GAAP if needed. Is it B, only the original budget and final budget presented on a GAAP basis? Is it C, the original budget, final budget, actual amounts and variances all presented on a GAAP basis? Or is it D, the final budget and actual amounts presented on the budgetary basis of accounting? So just another way of looking at how this is going to be reported, how it's going to be presented. If any of these sound familiar or if any of them sound correct based on what we've learned so far, then give it a good try. If not, that's okay. We're going to look at the answer together. All right, here we are. The answer is A, the original budget, the final budget, the actual amounts, and the variance columns. And those columns would be the original to the final and the final to the actual, presented on the budgetary basis of accounting with a reconciliation to GAAP if needed. Now, honestly, you probably could have guessed that that was the right one just because it was so much more specific than the other ones, but that's okay. GASB 103, which you probably don't need to know that exactly, but I just wanted to reference it, requires budgetary comparison schedules to include the original budget, the final budget, and actual amounts on the budgetary basis used for legal control. So those are the 3 most common ones that you'll need to know for sure, but there have been a few changes to it recently. If that basis differs from GAAP, a reconciliation must be provided. It also requires variance columns, and this is what changed recently. It used to not be required to do this, even though they usually did it. Now it is required. It also requires variance columns showing the original versus the final budget and the final budget versus the actual, what actually happened. Significant variances must be explained in the required supplementary information notes. So again, if you've seen something in your review course that's a little bit different than this, maybe they're saying that the variance columns aren't required. That might still be true for now, but in the near future, it will probably be updated because the current rule is that they do have to have variance columns. And again, those have to be the original versus the final and the final versus the actual. So again, these are the things that are going to be inside the budgetary comparison schedule. We've talked about a few different requirements so far, but this is what's actually required to be in the budgetary comparison schedule. The original budget, the final budget, the actual amounts, and then the variance columns comparing those. And then, of course, a reconciliation to GAAP if it's needed. Now, with that, we learned a little bit more, and let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 4. What must a government prepare in order to make the required budgetary comparison schedule for its annual comprehensive financial report? So what do they need to be able to do the report? Do they have to only have the final amended budget to show compliance with the budget as of year end? Do they have to only show actual revenues and expenditures since the budget is already on file with the governing body? Do they only have to show the original budget and the final amended budget presented on a GAAP basis? Or do they have to show the original budget, the final amended budget, the actual results on a budgetary basis, the variance columns, and explanations of significant variances in the RSI notes? Now, this is very similar to what we just looked at, so you probably already know the correct answer, but these are the kind of things that they need to be able to create the budgetary comparison schedule. So very similar to what we've already talked about. If you already know the answer, great. If not, maybe think about it, and when you're ready, come back. We'll look at the answer together. All right, here we are at the answer D, and you probably already knew this was the right answer. The original budget, the final amended budget, the actual results on a budgetary basis, variance columns, and explanations of significant variances in the RSI notes. Those are all things that they're going to have to be able to prepare the required budgetary comparison schedule. Under GASB 103, again, you probably don't really need to know that, but just wanted to throw it in there. The schedule must show the original budget, final amended budget, and actual results on the budgetary basis actually used for legal control. Because users also need to see how the plan changed and how performance compared with the final legal target, the schedule must include 2 variance columns, original versus final budget and the final budget versus actual. If the budgetary basis differs from GAAP, a reconciliation on the face of the schedule or in the notes is still required so readers can bridge from legal compliance to GAAP reporting. In addition, GASB 103 requires explanations of significant variances in the notes to RSI, providing brief reasons for notable differences rather than leaving users to guess. And again, that one kind of hit it all again, maybe just in slightly different wording. So I hope that's really clear to you at this point. Let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 5. Where is the budgetary comparison schedule required to be presented in a state or local government's annual comprehensive financial report? So we've learned a whole bunch of different things, but where is it going to show up? Is it part of the basic financial statements within the fund financial statements section? Is it required supplementary information following the notes to the financial statements? Is it shown as optional supplementary information included only if management chooses it? Or is it part of the management's discussion and analysis, which we talked about in the previous video? So where is this going to show up in the financial statements? If you watched the previous video, you might have a little bit of an idea. If not, that's okay. We're going to look at the answer together right now. All right, here we are. The answer B, as required supplementary information following the notes to the financial statements. So if you remember in the previous video, required supplementary information includes this and some other things. And it also includes the management discussion and analysis, but the management discussion and analysis is the only required supplementary information that you actually put before the financial statements. But the other required supplementary information, such as what we've been talking about this whole video, the budgetary comparison schedule, is going to be after the notes. So let's go through this. GASB 103 eliminates the option to report budgetary comparisons as a basic financial statement, which, by the way, you may still see that show up in your review course because maybe they haven't updated it yet. So that potentially might still be there. But as time goes on, this is not an option. It has to be shown after the notes. The budgetary comparison must be presented as RSI, typically after the notes. This placement subjects the schedule to RSI level procedures, not a full audit opinion, while highlighting its purpose, demonstrating budgetary compliance and accountability alongside the other required supplementary information such as the pension or the OPEB schedules. Pre-GASB 103 guidance, and this is what I was talking about, GASB 34 and 41, which, by the way, again, you don't really need to know that. But anyway, this allowed governments to place budgetary comparisons in the basic statements by election. That election is no longer permitted. Keeping this straight will help you flag older materials, including some test prep items, like I was saying, maybe in your review course, that still reference the optional basic statement presentation. So you may still see this in your review course, and it may even still be technically correct in the CPA exam because they maybe haven't updated it yet, but it will be updated soon. So I just want you to know the correct rule is that now it has to be shown as required supplementary information after the notes. It's not going to be a part of the basic statements. So we learned a lot about the budgetary comparison schedule, when it's required, what's in it, where it's going to show up in the financial statements. Now, before we do anything else, let's do one more part of the SuperFast CPA process called pillar topics. Now, the idea behind pillar topics is as you're going through the questions to learn the material, you will notice the things that keep popping up. You've seen 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 questions trying to teach you about what goes into the budgetary comparison schedule, like what's required to be in it, or whatever the case is. You notice these things throughout the questions in your review course, and as you're doing them, you pull out these important things and write them down as pillar topics in your own words. And as you're doing this each day, you will be building your own personal repository of the most important things you need to know for the exam so that you're ready for the exam. So let's go ahead and take a look at the pillar topics for this video. All right, here we are at the pillar topics. Let's just dive straight in. First off, let's talk about what funds require this. A budgetary comparison schedule is required for the general fund and for each major special revenue fund that has a legally adopted annual budget. Now let's talk about the presentation basis. It must be presented on the budgetary basis actually used, so whether that's cash or modified accrual, with a reconciliation to GAAP if the budget basis differs from what is required for GAAP. Now let's talk about the required elements. What's required to be in this schedule? The schedule must include the original budget, the final amended budget, and actual results, and that would be based on the budgetary basis. It also has to have the 2 variance columns, the original to the final and the final to the actual. Explanations of significant variances are provided in the RSI notes. So those are all the things that are required to be in this budgetary comparison schedule. Now let's talk about where this shows up in the financial statements. The budgetary comparison is reported as required supplementary information after the notes to the financial statements. It is not presented within the basic financial statements like it maybe used to be able to. And then finally, what's the point of it? The whole reason that we've been talking about it this whole video, its purpose is to show accountability and compliance with the legally adopted budget by comparing actual results to both the original plan and the final legally binding budget. So with that, we learned everything we need to know, the basics at least of the budgetary comparison schedule. We don't really need to cover anything else. So that is the end of the YouTube version of this video. Remember, in today's video, we only went over 5 questions. And while for this case, there is also only going to be 5 questions for the members, normally the member version of the video is 10 questions long so that they can get a little bit more help and a little bit more understanding when it's necessary. However, again, this topic really didn't have much more than this, so I didn't feel like it was necessary. But if you like this, make sure you check out Becoming a Pro member because you will get access to a lot of great stuff, including the full versions of these videos. So make sure you check that out. And the easiest way to learn about and become a SuperFast CPA Pro member is by going to SuperfastCPA.com and signing up for our free 1-hour webinar training. In that 1 hour, we will teach you the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam. And after that, you're going to want to learn more. And again, that's where you'll be able to more easily learn about and become a SuperFast CPA Pro member. So check out the webinar, check out Becoming a Pro member. If you liked the video, make sure to like it and leave a comment. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.